Hey guys, it's Justin again. We're back with another tutorial video. This is going to be a tutorial video on parts extension. This is going to be a pretty straightforward tutorial. I want to show it to you two different ways. So what we have here are parts of the Churitum Saga Gundam from Build Fighters. And I'm going to extend two different pieces of this, just a little bit. And I'm going to show you two different ways to do it. So the parts in question are going to be an extension here on the arm. So we're going to add a little bit of height to this just to make it look a little bit nicer. We don't need a ton on this. And the other thing we're going to extend is going to be the thigh. So we're going to go over the easier one first to get this out of the way. We're going to need a couple tools. You're going to need a saw of some kind. I don't know where my handle is, but the saw blade itself works just fine. You can get a photo etch one if you don't want to lose as much material. Preference is really up to you. You're going to need some glue. This is my favorite brand, so this is kind of what I recommend. And then you're going to need some styrene. Now this is evergreen, simple. There's a couple other brands that that make this stuff. The brand isn't important. What you want to pay attention to is the thickness. This is a variety sheet. It comes with a sheet of 0.10, 0.20, and 0.40. Today we're going to be using the 0.20 and the 0.40. So we're going to go ahead and pull both of those out. You might not be able to tell, but one is a little bit thicker than the other, obviously. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife, and if you can get a straight edge, that'll definitely work in your favor. I can just use the back end of this, that'll be fine. And we don't need a ton of this. I'm just going to very carefully trace the back end of that 3 times, and then you give it a quick pop, snaps right off. Same thing with the larger sheet. You know, I might need a little bit more for the larger one, but the process is still the same. I'm going to do a 4th cut on this one just to be on the safe side. And then pop it right off. So this is all we need. This is it. So this is going to go with the other one, the smaller sheet we're going to use for the arm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you can use your knife for this, you can use pretty much anything you want. I'm going to cut this down into some strips. It doesn't matter that they're perfect, just as long as the lines are straight. So use the flat end of your knife and get those as flat as you can, and that should be fine. Okay. So this is the easy method for joint extension. What you're going to do is, since we're going to be extending the bicep, we're just going to extend the bicep armor. Now we have about, if you check this with the with everything still on, I have this much room before I start getting resistance, which means I'm going to want to push this in about another millimeter. So this is about how much room we have where the arm can still sit on, still be stable, and we not have too many problems with the part not fitting anymore. That's a lot of room. And you can check and see that you can put probably 3 of these in here before having any issues. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little piece and I'm going to try and divide it up visually into sections. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of put this here, and I'm going to do my best to line it up with kind of the outside of one of these pieces. So what I mean by that is I'm I'm going to just put glue on the top portion, and I'm going to try not to go over this face on this side. So I'm going to line it up here and let the rest just kind of hang over. And that's fine. Next, I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And truthfully, the hardest part of this is the first face. Once you get the first one done, everything else is just filling in the gaps. And that last one should sit right on top, just like that. If I can hold the piece, that is. So once that's all glued, all glued down, and everything looks good, tighten the lid on our glue. And I'm just going to sit this down here like this. I'm going to push it down and make sure that all the faces are the way that they're supposed to be. We're going to let that dry for just a minute. And I'm going to grab my cutters. Now before this fully dries, I'm just going to go ahead and cut the excess bits off. You don't need to cut the whole thing. And if you're worried about losing any, just put your finger on it and it won't go flying. There we go. So push everything in, make sure everything looks the way you want it to, and I'm going to go over this one more time just over the top to kind of seal these little mini seams. And that's that. So that's the first method. Now what happens here is I'm going to be able to sleeve this on. The joint is still going to come through, but instead of meeting at the armor plate, it's going to meet at the extension. And that's just going to be a very simple, small, not even a 1/2 millimeter extension. Sometimes that's all you need, is just a little bit like that. So that's our first extension. And I'll come back and show you how to clean that up in a minute. Because the cleanup process is pretty much the same no matter what method you use. So method number 2 is a little bit more complicated. We are going to, in theory, do a lot of the same stuff. It's just the way we do it is going to be different. So again, I'm going to test the fitment of my part. I can see that I could probably get about what I want on here. So simple enough. So I'm going to take the entire piece off, and that might be a little bit of a problem, but we'll get through it. Got our plastic ready. Now before I go ahead and start cutting anything, I'm going to use a piece of tape. I'm going to use a knife, and I'm going to just cut a piece of tape. I'm going to try and mark where I want to make this cut, because it's kind of important. So there's one thin layer of plastic in the middle of this, and that's kind of what holds everything together. So I'm going to try not to cut through that if I can help it. Or maybe I want to cut through it, I don't know. But in my head, I think cutting about here is where I want to be. So now I have a pilot line for my cut. Now all I have to do is hold it the way that's the easiest to hold all this stuff, and try my best to keep everything straight. So let's do it this way. Actually going to start with my knife, and I'm just going to lay the knife flat and press it into the piece a little bit. And what that's going to do is create a little bit of a kind of ridge, and I should be able to rest my saw into that. And then it's just a matter of keeping everything nice and straight. So I'm going to start next to no pressure. I'm just going to let the saw kind of get its teeth into the piece. And then I can start applying more pressure once I feel that resistance kind of kick in. Now the hardest part of this is keeping the line straight, but once you start getting into the piece, it's only going one way. If you have a miter box for this, or a like a guide, this will save you a lot of hassle, a lot of headache, but as long as you work slowly and carefully, you should be fine. I've cut through a bunch of the tape on my cutting mat. It's okay though. There we go. So look at that. Pretty clean cut. I'm happy with that. Now, from here, you can kind of do the same thing we did with the other piece, or you can do what I'm going to do, just because, you know, it's there, is I'm going to take all the tape off. I think I did a pretty good job not mangling the tape, so that means that our line should be nice and straight. The first thing we need is to sand this down just to make sure that the surface is smooth as can be, and there's no like little overhang or anything like that. There we go. And these pieces should fit back together pretty close to normal. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the right size plastic. I'm going to lay this on here. I think I'm going to do just one layer. That should be fine. Now you got to remember, when you made this cut, you also removed a little bit of plastic. So it's not like you just split it. You know, I removed at least, I'd say 0.2, maybe 0.3 millimeters of material. So if you're looking to add a certain amount of height, you need to take that into consideration. But this, since we're just doing it for demonstration, I'm not looking for an exact measurement. I'm just looking to extend the piece a little bit. So there's what we got. I'm going to be pretty generous with this. I'm going to glue this down so that every single piece of, or every single edge of this is on the plastic sheet. I'm going to press that down. Make sure everything is fit correctly. And then again with the cutters, we're just going to come in, cut off this excess. Now I could absolutely, and you know, for the sake of demonstration I just might do it, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to add a second layer to this. I don't need to, but I'm going to. So just like that. Just like that. Press that down. Now while this is drying, you need to also take into consideration that there's a hole in the middle of this piece, and there's not a hole in the middle of this piece. So now we need to get a drill bit or something and drill out the center of that. So once this glue is dried, we can go ahead and do that. But we're going to let that sit for a minute. And we're going to come back to this piece. We're going to think about how we're going to clean this up. So the first thing we're going to do is take a pair of cutters, just cut away the excess as flush to the surface as you can. It's fine if it's not perfect, because you're going to come back in with an abrasive or a sanding stick or a file, something that's going to remove material, and you're going to cut the excess off. So something like that. Then you're going to take your sanding stick and you're going to sand each face. Now this has a curve to it, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to do, but again, work slow, work carefully, work from different angles, and eventually it will blend in and it'll look the way that you want it to look. So that's how you extend pieces that have like a little cap on them. I probably could have done something like that with this, but it would have been a lot more trouble with the curves and stuff. Additionally, if I just wanted to put some extra armor up top, I could have done that. So let's go ahead and cut some of this excess material off of here. Start with my corners. And I'm going to work my way through the other surfaces. Alright, next I'm going to take my pin vise. I'm going to just drill a little bit in the center. It doesn't need to be perfect. And then you should come through the other end. And then for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, if I can find it, this guy. I'm going to put it in the middle here, and I'm just going to twist it until it starts to widen up. You can do this from both sides if you want. Try not to stab yourself. And you can even come in with a larger drill bit if you want, and that should help you kind of clear more material a little bit quicker. Again, I don't need to use an actual pin vise for any of this, because I mean, these are it's a pretty large hole at this point. All I want to do is get through to the other side. So once I get to a certain point, I can switch over to using a round file, and I can just kind of twist and push this in, and hopefully not get it stuck like I'm doing. There we go. Now, I think this might be to the point where I can start testing to see if the joint will go through, and we are not quite there. So let's just widen this a little bit more. Because once the joint goes through, we can stop. And there it is. So now we can fit the joint on here. What we need to do next is glue the armor piece on. So just like with the first half, I'm going to just slather this in glue. I'm going to put this on here, and I'm going to just do my best to line it up on all sides. Just try and use the faces that are on the piece to keep everything nice and straight and connected. I'm noticing there's a tiny gap here. I probably could have, well, part of it is because this is not a straight piece, it's a normal kind of piece, so I'm gonna have to remove a little bit of material to keep these faces nice and flush. But again, when you're modifying pieces, that's something that you need to take into consideration and kind of account for. So we're going to sand it, then we're going to have to fill the gaps and then sand it again. But that's pretty much the gist of things. That's how you extend your joints. I can plug this onto here right now. And then I can plug the hip joint in. And it's not as tight as it was, but when you compare it to the other leg, you've got a pretty good size difference. It's not, you know, the largest difference in the world, but sometimes that extra millimeter or two is all you need. So that's how you extend joints. Again, a little bit of sanding from here, and then if there's any gaps, just fill them with super glue or putty and you are good to go. So thank you, George, for requesting this tutorial. It was a lot of fun to do. I don't get to do this very often because a lot of modern kits tend to come with pretty decent proportions, but some of these older ones are designs based on older kits, need a little bit more love than others. So that's it. That's where I'm going to leave this, and thank you guys for watching. See you next time.